On the silver screen, they were legends: John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Steve McQueen. They were the stoic gunslingers who tamed the wild frontier, the white hats who always had each other's backs when the bullets started flying. They stood for courage, strength, and a rugged American individualism that we all admired. But what if I told you that behind the heroic facade, a vastly different story was unfolding? That the same men who represented unbreakable bonds on screen were often locked in bitter, off-screen rivalries that seethed with jealousy and personal hatred. The dust-ups weren't just on Main Street, and the duels were often waged with egos and insults, not six-shooters. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to reveal the real reason so many of these Western icons secretly couldn't stand each other. And the answer is far more complex than a simple clash of big egos. If you enjoy learning the hidden truths behind the Old West and the films that defined it, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. You won't want to miss what we have coming up. Part 1, The Gilded Cage. To understand the bad blood, you first have to understand the machine that created these stars, the old Hollywood studio system. During its golden age, a handful of major studios, like MGM, Warner Brothers, and Paramount, held all the power. They weren't just making movies, they were mass-producing stars on an assembly line. Promising young actors were signed to ironclad 7-year contracts that basically made them the property of the studio. The studio heads had almost total control. Actors were told which movies to make, whether they liked the script or not. A refusal could get you suspended without pay. The studios could even punish a difficult star by loaning them out to a lesser studio for a bad film, something Clark Gable famously went through. This control was absolute. Studios changed actors' names to be more marketable. Archibald Leach became Cary Grant. They dictated everything from hair color and dental work to diet and exercise. Your public image was meticulously crafted and policed. You weren't a person, you were a commodity. Within this rigid system, the studios actively encouraged a climate of intense competition. Actors of a similar type, especially the rugged, handsome men who would become Western stars, were constantly pitted against one another. They were all vying for the same small number of leading roles, for better billing on the movie poster, and for higher status within the studio. It was a vicious zero-sum game for survival. The studios knew exactly what they were doing. Their publicity departments would even plant stories in the papers about fake feuds or romances just to get the public's attention. They saw rivalry not as a problem, but as a feature. It normalized conflict and hammered home the idea that an actor's career was a constant battle against his peers. So when these stars lashed out on set, it wasn't just about ego. They had no control over their roles, their money, or their public image. The film set was one of the only places they could try to assert any power at all. The fights over screen time, dialogue, or billing were really just proxy wars for the control the system had taken from them. Part 2. The Cowboy Code. If the studio system built the pressure cooker, the Western genre itself provided the explosive ingredients. The conflicts between these actors were fueled by the very archetype they were paid to embody: the American cowboy. The Western hero is the ultimate symbol of American masculinity. He's strong, solitary, and speaks with his actions, not his words. He solves problems swiftly and usually with violence. He projects an image of absolute invulnerability, never showing pain, fear, or weakness. He is always the dominant man in the room. This created an impossibly rigid ideal of manhood that left no room for sensitivity or self-doubt. And the men who played these roles weren't just seen as acting tough, they were expected to be tough, both on and off the screen. The great director John Ford, the man who basically invented the modern Western, was famous for shaping John Wayne's persona. Ford couldn't stand any perceived softness in his actors. He once saw a young Wayne skipping on set and yelled at him to stop, saying he looked like a goddamn fairy. Ford's vision forced Wayne to become the tough-as-nails icon we remember today. This created a huge internal conflict for these actors. The profession of acting is filled with insecurity, vulnerability, and the constant fear of failure. Yet these men had to project an unbreakable image of strength and confidence at all times. The pressure was immense. Even John Wayne, the ultimate symbol of American masculinity, admitted how artificial it all was. In a 1957 interview, he confessed, "That guy you see on the screen isn't really me." He knew he couldn't live up to the impossible standards of his own characters. This constant struggle, the need to seem invincible while feeling vulnerable, often boiled over into real-world conflict. The aggressive and often bullying behavior of these actors can be seen as a desperate attempt to prove their own masculinity, to show the world and themselves that they were as tough as the heroes they played. The Feuds became a public performance of the Cowboy Code, where every challenge had to be met with dominance. Part 3. Case Studies in Conflict. When you look at the most legendary feuds of the West, you can see these forces at play. They weren't random spats. They were textbook examples of a broken system and a toxic culture. First, you have the king of the genre himself, John Wayne. His feuds were often ideological battles for the soul of the Western. His most famous rivalry was with Clint Eastwood. By the 1970s, Wayne was the old guard. He believed Westerns should be about heroism and clear-cut good versus evil. Eastwood, on the other hand, represented a new, more cynical generation. His films, like High Plains Drifter, were dark and blurred the lines between hero and villain. Wayne was disgusted. When Eastwood, who actually admired Wayne, suggested they make a movie together, Wayne didn't just say no. He sent Eastwood a scathing letter, personally attacking High Plains Drifter for not being about the true pioneers of the West. In Wayne's eyes, Eastwood was contaminating the sacred American myth he had spent his life building. The two giants never reconciled. Then there was Wayne's conflict with a young James Caan on the set of El Dorado. This was a raw display of power. Wayne, the veteran alpha, subjected Caan to what could only be called a hazing ritual. He condescendingly called him kid and relentlessly gave him conflicting directions during filming, pushing Caan to his breaking point. Caan later said he was about to hit him before Robert Mitchum stepped in. It was a classic case of the old bull establishing his territory and testing the young calf. Next is Steve McQueen, the king of cool. Behind that cool facade was a deeply insecure man with a relentless competitive streak. His feud with Yul Brynner on the set of The Magnificent Seven is one of Hollywood's most infamous. McQueen, then a rising star, was unhappy with his small role and felt overshadowed by the top-billed Brynner. So he launched a childish campaign to upstage him. During Brynner's scenes, McQueen would deliberately fidget with his hat or rattle his shotgun shells to draw the camera's focus. Brynner often built small mounds of dirt to stand on to appear taller. McQueen made a habit of casually kicking the dirt away right before a take. The feud simmered for 20 years. It only ended when McQueen, who was sadly nearing the end of his life, called Brynner to apologize, admitting that Brynner could have had him kicked off the movie but didn't. McQueen's rivalry with Paul Newman was just as intense. During the filming of The Towering Inferno, McQueen was obsessed with his status. He demanded top billing over Newman, but it went even further. McQueen went through the entire script and counted every single line of dialogue for both characters. When he found out Newman had 12 more lines, he demanded the screenwriter add more for him. The two stars never worked together again. Perhaps the most complicated rivalry was the 40-year relationship between Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster. They made 7 films together and were both titans of the screen. Publicly, Douglas always framed their relationship as a deep, if competitive, friendship. He admitted they fought a lot, but said it pushed them to do their best work. However, many believed this friendship was a myth. According to Burt Lancaster's biography, he privately despised Douglas, seeing him as vain and narcissistic. Lancaster, known for his own volcanic temper, was a bully on set. He relentlessly teased Douglas about his shorter stature and the shoe lifts he wore, and the teasing was so merciless that it once made Douglas break down and cry in front of fans. Their dynamic was the perfect example of the Hollywood era, a carefully managed public image that hid a messy and bitter private reality. The dust has long settled on those old Western sets, but the echoes of these conflicts remain. The real reason so many of these icons hated each other wasn't just about ego. The animosity was systemic, cultural, and deeply psychological. It was born from a studio system that stripped them of their power and pitted them against each other. It was fueled by a rigid cowboy code that demanded a constant performance of masculinity, turning professional competition into personal warfare. And it was driven by the deep insecurity that came with being a Hollywood star, forcing these men to mask their vulnerability with aggression. Ultimately, these feuds are more than just Hollywood gossip. They reveal the human cost of manufacturing myths. They tell the story of men struggling to reconcile the person they were with the icon they were forced to become, fighting their own private battles in the only way they knew how. But what do you think? Which of these legendary rivalries surprised you the most? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching.